All right, boys, I think that we are finally in live again. And what we are gonna do today, for what concern today, we are gonna discuss first about the new upcoming season and all the patch notice that we can actually uh, discuss. So I'm here in live for you right now. I am live on my Twitch channel, and here you can come actually to interact with me, to have a conversation. Maybe right here, right now, can spam someone, for instance, and can talk with me. Now, let's go deep into the video because a lot of you are going to watch this directly on YouTube instead of the live streaming. And I'm gonna read for you guys the patch notice. Let me put my headphone on charge first, and let's jump into the video. So, with their current campaign coming to a close, the adventurers leave the forefront as new mysteries arise, which will require tune with a careful intuition and very refined sense of deduction. As such, we'll be introducing the detectives, a specialist squad that will try and sort out these ruckus wherever it may come up in the world of Mayhem. So, guys, for what concern this, I have already done a video about that, and I hope you go check it already on my YouTube channel. I talked about the first, uh, the first actually detective. Good evening, Mr. Zap. As I told you guys in live streaming, you can come and leave your comments. So, the video, no, sorry, not video. We will also be revisiting a couple of teams that have been long time favorites. While the detective will sort out the streets, both the villains and the SUPERTOONs will be receiving broad rewards in addition to a new team member. So we are gonna have also, good evening, Mr. Lorenzo. We will have also the reward for what concern villains and SUPERTOONs. To fully realize some of these rewards, however, will also be changing the mechanics of the damage over time status effect. So, damage over time will not be the same. We'll go over the details below, but as to make sure this immediately clear, we are aware that these changes will affect many more tunes than just villains. For instance, we talk about Scoundrels team, of course, and we will make adjustment to these tunes and teams as they prove necessary due to these changes. While tunes that are not based around damage over time should be heavily impacted, we already have an ongoing rework for the Scoundrel team to accommodate these changes, although it will not be released this season. So we are talking to the next season. Now let's talk about the detective. The detectives are coming into the fold as another team to add your collection of the strong defenses as a second team that's built around counterattack and the buff resistance. As we are still following leads on what our final squad will be, we can already say that our most tenured detective, Joe Monday, so Joe Monday will be a full rework and will be an actual detective. Here is a sneak peek at their team passive. Detective Tunes gain 2 detectives hunch for 3 turns at the start of the battle and a detective's hunch for 3 turns whenever they perform a counter attack. Each detective's hunch grants plus 20% counter chance and plus 10% debuff resistance. So the whole team will be based on counter attack. So like every team based on counter attack, we can actually counter them with uh, dodge team, I guess. Let's read about the balance. Balance changes. For this season, we are not doing any specific balance changes, as we monitor team and tune performance as well as our feedback channels. We have a few ideas to discuss for further seasons, but no changes will be made to current tunes aside from the rewards below. We are, however, with the most recent game version, introducing a change to the mechanics of the damage over time status effect. To contextualize the change, the original way that the status effect dealt damage was based on a tune's attack and completely ignored the enemy's defense. As the game has evolved and new features have been introduced, it has become commonplace to very heavily invest in a tune's attack stat, upwards of more than a double a tune's baseline attack stat, and this makes it so that the damage caused by damage over time quickly goes out of hand. As we want to modernize the older teams that are based around damage over time mechanics, which still remain viable in certain mixed composition even with very old stat line, we decide to change the damage over time to no longer be related to a tune's attack, and instead deal consistent amount of max health damage per stacks. And finally, this makes sense because if you want to do something, you have always to base on max health. This is a basic mechanic, for instance, in League of Legends. Actually, max health will be also broken because, for instance, in League of Legends, they introduced the current max health, which is a lot different. And max health damage will be broken. I'm sure about that because I see that constantly in video games. So they probably are implementing this and later they are gonna nerf it back. I'm sure about that. This change was made to accomplish a few different things. More importantly, we simply want to bring the status effects effectiveness down so that both old and new tunes do not need to be heavily constrained by its raw power. These allow us to actually work with the status effect and build characters to work with the status effect instead of solely relying on it to do all the heavy lifting. Of course, these affect a broad spectrum of characters. We are monitoring both teams and individual tunes on a case by case basis to see which tunes would need specific rebalancing due to this retuning. Naturally, both of the themes that are centered around the damage over time mechanics, the villains and the scoundrels, are due change at this will heavily change their effectiveness, of course, because they are ultra based on this. As you be able to see in the upcoming rewards section, the villains are already receiving a wide range of rewards in this season, which you can expect relatively early on. The scoundrels, on the other hand, are still a work in progress, but they will go through a rework as well, including a modernization of their stat line. Reworks. Although most of these rewards are completely good to go, we are still in final stages of testing, especially pertaining to those tunes affected by the damage over time changes. At this point, this is how rewards are looking, although as always, these are subject to change, of course. Of course. Detective. As a veteran of the squad, Joey Monday will be getting a majorly propped up. We are building the detectives based on Joey Monday's unique traits as a really tender tune in our game, as he already carries quite a few powerful mechanics on his existing kit. Joy Monday removed from Team Cop, added to Team Detective, rarity changed from common to epic. So this tune also is epic now. And damn, that's a problem because it will be more difficult to power up. Attack, you can see a very enormous amount of buff. Look, for instance, to the attack is insane for what concerns defense, health, speed. This is a very powerful buff. Skill name, old and new. Weak spot deals 100% damage to the target enemy. Deal 100 damage to target enemy, gaining 2 attacks up. This tune is immune to all negative status effect. This tune is immune to all debuff. Plus, 1 per turn. Whenever a team member resists a debuff, grant them speed up for 2 turns. Hit 5 times for a total of this damage. This attack is always critical. Now, warm up removed, cooldown increased to 2 hit 5 times for a total of less damage, but you have to consider that this attack is a lot. Now, inflicting defense down or speed down with each hit. This attack is always critical hit. Whenever an ally with taunt is attacked, this tune gains 20% turn meter. Now, once per each of these tunes turn and unless incapacitated, when an ally with taunt is attacked, gain plus 20% turn meter and inflict that enemy with 2 defense down. While in Alliance War, so now he will have a buff also for Alliance War, inflict 2 defense down to all other enemies as well. These tunes have plus 50% counter chance. Is the same, but whenever this tune performs a counter attack, Grant all detective stats up. So this is for what concern Supertoons now. The Supertoons are coming back up to speed as the team that's merely based on damage immunity. We are centering that mechanic as the team main identity by moving one of the effects from Super Rabbit, I'll save you, so that was a leadership, now is just a friendship skill. And this is big, I guess, because Super Tunes gain damage immunity at the start of the battle. So you do not need anymore to bring a Super Rabbit with you. Actually, so let's see how they balance that, introducing this buff at the beginning of the battle without any consideration about the fact if Super Rabbit is here or not. So, while the new team passive has taken some power away from the leader, of course, the leader of the Super Tune is Super Rabbit, we are retooling him to be an even stronger protector of the Mick with a large of rework of his abilities. So now he has an insane amount of attack. No, I do not have the new Lunar. So he has an insane amount of attack, an insane amount of defense and health and speed, so will be actually more super than ever. And let's see now for what concern his new skill. So the first flying punch deal the damage to the target enemy with plus 50% piercing once per turn. Whenever an enemy steals, use this against them. So deal the same damage to target enemy plus the same percent once per turn, unless incapacitated. Whenever an enemy steals, use this against them. So look like before worked even with the fact that he was stunned or whatever. Now not work anymore. So this should be an actual nerf on the first yeah, look like it's a nerf. Now gain taunt and 4 attack up for 2 turns. Grant the most damage ally damage immunity to heal over time, blah 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 blah. Now gain taunt 3 attack up, so 1 attack up less, but 3 defense up. Grant the most injured ally damage immunity to heal over time and 2 debuff resistance up. I don't know. Super Carrot, gain 4 defense up, 3 attack up, 2 speed up, gain damage immunity and plus 50% turn meter. Gain defense up, 3 attack up, and 2 speed up for 2 turns. If this tune has taunt, gain damage immunity. Otherwise, gain 50% turn meter. So, look like this is a buff, in my opinion, because now has sense, because if the tune has taunt, gain damage immunity. So, look like it's now the leader of the night team. So this is the same passive as the passive of I don't remember the name, Bugs the Brave. Yeah, Bugs the Brave. Now, for what concern multiverse, deal 100% damage to all enemies, plus 10% extra damage for each SUPERTOON team member. Now we have warm up increased to 1. No, I don't know what is warm up actually. Deal 100% damage to all enemy with an additional 10% damage for each SUPERTOON ally, while in arena, inflict 2 defense down for 2 turns on each enemy. So this team will get actually buffed for arena. In previous protector, while this turn is in the battle, your team has plus 50% buff resistance and all enemies have minus 5% speed for each SUPERTOON team member. While this tune is in the battle, SUPERTOON's team have plus 50% the buff resistance and all enemies have minus 5% speed for each SUPERTOON team member. This tune has plus 20% defense for each ally with damage immunity. Actually, I don't see the sense in this because if he had damage immunity, actually should not, I mean, defense is worthless. Warm up is the number. Thank you, Mr. Zap, for actual answering. But I need to actual modify, because on the stream look like that white on white is not that good. So I need to actually remove this. Yeah, now we can read better what Mr. Zap is writing. So warm up is the number of turns that must pass at the start of the battle. Oh, I get it. Before a turn can cause an attack for the first time. Thank you for explaining that. So it's basically an increased cooldown. I prefer to say cooldown, but look like warm up is actually more accurate, because cooldown is when you already used an ability, so the ability go in cooldown. Look like the perfect term is warm up. Thank you. So while this tune is in battle, oh no, sorry, we already have read that. I'll save you. So now, I'll save you was at the start of the battle, SUPERTOON team member gain damage immunity until the end of each enemy first turn. Whenever a SUPERTOON team member with damage immunity attacks an enemy, grant them to random stat up for 2 turns. So now complete rework once per team member and unless incapacitated. The first time a SUPERTOON team member lose damage immunity, grant them immunity. Damn. So this actually means that Super Rabbit is still super available to consider himself in the team, because the first time they will lose the barrier, Super Rabbit give them back the barrier. So this is actually insane. So we do not have SUPERTOON team passive. This is completely new. SUPERTOON gain damage immunity at the start of the battle. So now here we are gonna see a lot of buff for what concern the flaming succotage, and look like we have a reward too for what concern the abilities. So we have deal 100% damage to target enemy, gain 2 speed up for 2 turns. So we have more damage than before. So that's a buff. Stock for the Flame. Gain 3 attack up, 2 healing over time for 2 turns, plus 50% turn meter. Grant all SUPERTOON 4 stat up. Gain 3 attack up, 2 healing over time for 2 turns, plus 50% turn meter. Grant all allies for random stat up. While in Arena, so we have another toon that have actually a buff for what concern Arena. Grants all allies that lack taunt 20% turn meter. So this is an actual buff if you decide to use, for instance, a Super Rabbit or Hector. Because if you have 2 defenders and if they have no taunt, they will actually be faster. Shielded Strength. This toon has plus 50% attack. Team members with damage immunity have plus 50% attack. Now, this is game changing in my opinion. This toon has plus 25% piercing, which is I think better than plus 25% attack. Also because his attack is a lot more, so now we will see the damage out of this toon. While this toon remains in the battle, team members have with damage immunity have plus 50% attack. While this toon has damage immunity, team members that lack taunt have again more speed. So look like the Flaming Succotash is ultra available. Flare Ball deal damage if defeat the target, use Fireball again on a random enemy. And now we have the warm-up, and now we already know what is warm-up thanks to Mr. Zap. Deal more damage, inflicting also 2 defense down and speed down. If defeat the target, use Flare Ball again on a random enemy, but this can trigger just 1 SUPERTOON. So this is an actual nerf, because before you can just, for instance, try to one-shot the entire team with the same skill. Now you can't. It's just 1 SUPERTOON. Hero's Journey. While this toon is in the battle, your team has plus 25% resistance to turn meter reduction for its SUPERTOON. So this was ultra available versus Magic Team. So for a lot of years, we used that SUPERTOONs with Flaming Succotash versus Magic Team, for instance. Now, while this toon is in the battle, SUPERTOON team have plus 100% resistance to turn meter removal. So it's not for what concern, you do not have to have for SUPERTOON anymore. You put your Flaming Succotash into the team, you instantly have plus 100% resistance to turn meter removal. So with him, you cannot be removed in turn meter. Grant SUPERTOON. Team members speed up for 2 turns at the start of the battle, so they actually will be also faster. And the same passive, which is actually the same for everything. So for what concern Presto Pig, He is also buffed as well. Now, the first is not changed, so just text adjusted. For what concern Book of Eternals Beacon, heal your team for 120% heal power, replacing all damage over time with heal over time. Heal all team member, granting heal over time to each. Convert all damage over time on your team to heal over time. While in Arena, so we have the third buff for what concern Arena, Clee sends each team member of a random stat down as well. Press I can't read that. Whenever an enemy inflicts one of more damage over time, gain turn meter. Now, whenever a team member is inflicted with damage over time, unless incapacitated, gain plus 35% turn meter and grant all SUPERTOON team members 2 attacks up for 2 turns. Okay, look, almost the same. Most of these grant your team damage immunity and 4 attack up. Grant taunt to the ally with the highest defense. Grant your team damage immunity and 4 attack up. Grant taunt ally the high. So it's basically the same. Self-working trunk. Deal damage to target enemy plus 10% damage of each heal over time. Text adjustment and same. Oh, Omega Chungus. Chungus Throw has been renamed Chungus Beam, which is actually make more sense. Look at the buff. Is not a lot, but you need to consider that the damage of Chungus is already broken, so now is more broken. Chungus Beam deal plus 85% damage to all enemies. If this stun has damage immunity, inflict 2 defense down on each enemy. Well, now it's a big nerf on the percentage. If the stun has damage immunity, inflict 2 defense down on each enemy, deal an additional 30% damage when used during these tunes on turn. So, I do not understand that. Maybe it's nerfed on the counter attack, maybe so, because the percentage is the same, but look like is a nerf on the counter attack, because if he was countering attack, maybe now he will deal less damage. Welcome, Mr. Duncan Cloud. We are reading together the page notice. Super Chumbo Strike. Deal 100% damage to all enemies. For each time a team member has gained damage immunity this battle, inflict a random stat down or a special stat down up to 6 for each enemy for 3 turns. Now we have the warm-up, and that's painful to hear, but we have cooldown decreased to 2, which is better. Deal 100% damage to all enemies. For each time this stun has gained damage immunity, inflict a random stat down, blah blah blah. Damage immunity at the beginning. Super Coyote. I would like to understand what they did to this, because not everyone is using Super Coyote. So deal plus 200% damage to target enemy and plus 50% damage to this turn. Then remove damage immunity. Now we have warm up increased to 2. Damn. Damn, that's actually bad, but let's see what they did. Deal plus 200% damage to target enemy and plus 50% damage to this tune. Then remove all damage immunity from this tune. So look like you can stack more damage immunity. This attack has plus 10% piercing for each SUPERTOON ally. Coyote Confidence. Whenever this tune gains damage immunity, gain plus 10% attack for the rest of the battle. Wow. Whenever this tune gains damage immunity, gain plus percent attack for the rest of the battle, and in Alliance, and in Arena, gain speed up as well. So in Arena will be actually ultra fast. Because, for instance, you give him 10 barriers, so he will be actually with a double speed. Gain damage immunity and plus 50% turn meter, removing 3 attack down for this tune. Gain damage immunity, 50% turn meter, clean sensing 5 attack down. If any attack down was clean sensed, grant your allies 10% turn meter and attack up. So actually will be insane in my opinion. Because will be ultra fast and he will hit ultra hard. Heroes never sleep. Whenever a SUPERTOON team member hits an enemy, grant that SUPERTOON to heal over time and clean send to random stat down. That was always good. And we have the same passive as always. Damage immunity at the start of the battle. Now we have the Iron Mat, and Iron Mat is the last. So, a lot of more attack, not quite more defense, but very big buff of health, good amount of speed. Now, Gleaming Hope, gain 3 heal over time and 50% turn meter. Then inflict to all enemies with defense down for each heal over time on your team. Remove a buff from each enemy villain. Okay. Cooldown, reduce it to 2. Nice. Gain 3 heal over time and 50% turn meter, then inflict to all enemies with defense down for each team member with heal over time, remove 3 stat up, blah blah blah. So remove 3 stat up for each enemy, so not concerned anymore to go against a villain, which is better. Whenever one or more team member gain damage immunity and these tunes Lockdown to gain plus 50% turn meter. Whenever one or more team members gain damage immunity, gain 25% turn meter. If these tunes lockdown or gang attack up for 2 turns, if these two, I do not understand. Whenever one or more team members gain damage immunity, gain plus 25% turn meter. Okay. If these tunes lack taunt, of course. Or gain attack up. Deal 100% damage to target enemy, then deal plus so less damage to the other one. Now we have the warm up. Deal 100% damage to target enemy and less, but while in arena, inflict defense down. Now we have a work for what concern villains. And this is maybe the last thing to read. So let's see what happened to the villains. As one of the team affected with damage over time changes, the villains are all going through a large reworks. These are aimed both compensate for fewer power loss of the mechanical change while giving their skills more power so they aren't solely dependent on applying damage over time. While some of their changes are more modest than others, Evil Granny has gone through the most extensive rework in quite a while. Part of her leadership skill is being transferred to a newly introduced team passive. So, villains tunes have a 25% chance to be revived at 50% max health at the end of the turn whenever they are defeated. So, look like this percentage is actually really poor because probably 25% is not that good. I mean, in my experience, actually, my tunes never revive, especially when I use them on attack. Instead, on the enemy team, when I attack, they always revive. I don't know how. But anyway, let's see the rework of the granny. Of course, a lot of abilities, a lot of stats improved, was improved. Now let's see for what concern the skills, which is more important. Gain taunt for 2 turns, inflicting to all enemy with 5 damage over time. Sorry, 4 damage over time for 2 turns. Gain taunt for 2 turns, inflicting to all enemies with 3 damage over time for 2 turns. Then for each enemy with 5 or more damage over time, heal for... This is actually good. So she will taunt and she will heal and is pretty good. Stand in Judgment. This tune has 10% defense for each damage over time. This tune has 5% attack and plus 10% defense for each enemy with damage over time. I do not understand the fact for each enemy with damage over time on the enemy team. Of course, is on the enemy team. What the hell? I don't know. Now, grant your team 4 attack up for 2 turns, then deal 100% damage to all enemies. Now we have the warm up. Grant your team 4 attack up for 2 turns, deal 100% damage. Now we have silence the enemy with the highest turn meter, which is actually a big buff. While this tune is in the battle, non-space enemies have minus 5% attack for each space tune on this team. And now, while this tune is in the battle and has at least one villain ally, all enemies have minus 20% attack and minus 20% defense. This is an ultra buff in my opinion because you can mix it very well with Scoundrel now. Whenever an ally is defeated at the end of the turn, this tune has 50% chance to revive a random ally at 50% health. Whenever a villain is revived, remove 3 or 5 buff from all enemies. Whenever an ally is revived, unless incapacitated, please send all stat down from this tune and gain taunt. Then remove 3 stat up and 3 special stat up from all enemies. Abandon Hope. This is new. While in Arena, this tune has 10% stats, and while this tune remains on the battle and is placed on offense, villain team member has 2.5 counter chance for each damage over time on the enemy team until the end of their first turn. This is a buff, of course. Arch Evolve. Whenever a villain's ally revives, these tunes glistens a debuff, all debuff, and gains taunt, inflicting all enemies super tunes with 2 attack down for the rest of the battle. Complete Rework. These tunes has its revive chance from their team ability doubled. So, let me explain. Villain's tunes have 25% chance to be revived. Now, the Granny has a very large amount to be revived because this tune has its revive chance from their team ability doubled. And while this tune remains in the battle, villains ally have their revive chance doubled as well. Now, everything makes sense because they have 20%, 25% as default to be revived, but if the Granny is here, so the chance is doubled as well. So this is an actually ultra buff because in the past, only if you have this tune on your team, allies can revive. Now, without the Granny, they still have some chance to be revived. But of course, if you have the Granny, this is doubled as well. Now, villain team passive, villain tune have 25% to be revived at 50% max health. This is the same. So, Nova Bunny. Nova Bunny has a lot of attack and defense and health and speed. So many speed. Now, let's see for what concern his kit. For what concern this, deal less damage. So here we have 100% and 5 and 50% damage to a random enemy, inflicting damage over time with each attack. Now less damage but inflicting damage over time. Then deal 50% damage to an additional random enemy, inflicting damage over time. Cosmic Reconstruction. Heal your team for 100 and 10% heal power plus an extra 5% for each damage over time. Now heal, this is the same, but is up to 50% max. So now we have a limit. For each damage over time on the enemy team, please send 3 stats down from each team member. Whenever an enemy hits this toon, inflict that enemy with 3 damage over time for 2 turns. Now, unless incapacitated, whenever a team member is damaged, if the attacking enemy has 2 or less damage over time, inflict them with damage over time for 3 turns. Otherwise, heal that team member for 3% max health. Okay, now it's unless incapacitated, which is not the same. Okay. So finally we have a heal on the max health. The heal on the max health is always the same. Is always the best thing you can get. Ciao. Grant all allies 3 attack up for 2 turns, dealing 100% damage to all enemies. Grant all team member 3 attack up for 2 turns, then deal 100% damage to all enemies. Remove 2% turn meter from each enemy for each damage over time. This is actually insane because this will slow a lot the enemy team. Once per battle, whenever a villain team member falls below 30% max health and this toon isn't incapacitated, gain 5 attack up for the rest of the battle and use Cosmic Reconstruction. Now, again, once per battle, when any villain team member falls below 30% max health. Ciao Fabrizio. Unless incapacitated, gain 5 attack up for 2 turns and use Cosmic Reconstruction, while in Arena, this skill reset whenever this toon is revived. So, yes. So, this is an ultra buff because if Nova Bunny get defeated and if she come back to life, this skill get a reset, and this is the same passive that we read before. Now, for what concern Raptcallion, we have a large amount of buff in attack. So actually, finally, he will deal some damage, and he is faster and has more health and defense. So this is actually pretty good. Now, skill name. Exactly. We already have talked about that. Yes, I have talked about SUPERTOON before. Now, for what concern, the first is the same. Deal damage to target enemy. Whenever an allied evil granny takes damage, there is a chance to counter attack. Now is the same. So let's check for void stuff. Actually, Void Staff is an item of League of Legends too. Now, deal damage to target enemy, gaining 5% turn meter for each damage over time in battle. Cooldown increased to 3. Damn. Warm up increased to 2. So, of course, is nerfed. Now we have more damage to target enemy, and then for each damage over time on the enemy team, gain 5% turn meter and either grant a random team member attack up for 3 turn or inflict a random enemy with defense down for 3 turn. Once per each of these tunes turn, whenever an enemy with 3 or more damage over time hits an allied villains, gain 3 attack up. Now, once per each of these tunes turn, when a team member is damaged by an enemy with 3 or more damage over time, grant your team 3 attack up. While in arena, grant your team 2 speed up as well. So another buff for what concern arena. Remove damage immunity from all enemies, then hit them for 100% damage. If these defeat one or more enemies, inflict the rest with 3 damage over time for the rest of the battle. Now we have the warm up. I don't think is good because you cannot go against SUPERTOON now, my opinion. Cooldown reduced to 2, but you can spam more time this ability. Remove all damage immunity from the enemy team, then hit for 100% damage and inflict each with 2 damage over time for 2 turns. So we will not have the damage over time for the rest of the battle anymore. While this tune is in the battle, all enemies have plus 25% to heal resistance to heal over time for each villain. While this turn is in the battle, all enemies have minus 5% recovery for each damage over time and plus 25% resistance to heal over time for each villain on your team. Of course, this is an adjustment to the fact that also recovery has introduced to the game. Recovery is a new stuff introduced after villains, so now we have this adjustment. And this is the same passive. Now we also see that Supersonic Hopper has a lot of buff. Now let's see about his final change. Now gain 50% turn meter and hidden for the rest of the battle, losing all debuff. The next time this tune use Power Gauntlet, while hidden gain 4 attack up, lose hidden and use Orbital Drop. Now, gain hidden for the rest of the battle, clean sensing all debuff, grants your team 4 piercing up for 2 turns, which is more. This is actually better because piercing is always best. I remember when piercing was introduced to cubes, for instance, and was actually insane. So every time you see piercing into the game is a good stuff. Gain 50% turn meter until the end of each enemy's next turn. Whenever they gain damage over time, inflict them with another if hidden, inflict all enemies with damage over time. Change it to a passive skill. So now you do not have to activate this anymore because finally it's a passive and this actually makes sense. Because every time I used to use this tune, I feel that was so weak. Now maybe is is better. Also, we get a passive in arena. While this tune is hidden and once per enemy per turn, whenever an enemy is inflicted with one or more damage over time, inflict them with another and gain 10% turn meter, while in arena inflict them with speed down as well. Orbital drop. Deal 100% damage to all enemies, inflicting them with 2 damage over time for 2 turns. Change it to an active skill. Okay. Now it has warm up of 1 and cooldown of 2. I don't know. I don't know. Deal 100% damage to all enemies, inflicting them with damage over time for 2 turns. Lose hidden. Crisis ensured. Whenever a team member revives, it inflicts all enemies with 3 damage over time for 2 turns. If it's a villain, grant it 3 attack, 3 or 4 attack up first. While this turn remains in the battle, whenever a team member is revived, it inflicts to all enemies with 3 damage over time for 2 turns. If they are a villain, grant them 20% turn meter. And that's all, folks. All is written by Nastyfero. Now, of course, we are going to change and we go back to the gameplay. I actually need to yes,